Hey, folks, welcome back to the Carl Zahn Show, the post-presidential debate episode. Don't forget to smash that like button, as the kids say, and subscribe, share, do all that good stuff as we try to grow the channel here. A little bit full. I just finished a bacon, egg, and schnauzer breakfast sandwich on my way to the studio. But before we get into the unusual food trucks that are showing up in Springfield, Ohio, let's talk about the presidential debate for a moment. If you've watched the show, you know I'm an avid Trump supporter, but I do call him like I see him. And Trump's own assessment of his performance notwithstanding, I would say that the debate was an abysmal performance by the former president. Pretty stunning to see Kamala Harris come out, the word salad queen. And I think everybody, including myself, was expecting a long 90 minutes of her stumbling over her answers and, the word salad, and probably venturing off into her love of Venn diagrams and yellow school buses. But instead, what we saw was this almost Frankenstein-like recreation of Kamala Harris. So she's been in lockdown, and I understand that during her debate prep, they actually had someone that looked like Trump, basically wearing a Trump costume. They had the exact lighting that they were going to have on the stage. They had a kind of a replica of the stage. They did everything they could to have her braced for exactly what the debate was going to look like. We all know this was slanted with David Muir and, obviously a very liberal news station presenting and moderating the debate. But Trump knew that going in. So, to not be prepared for that, and my understanding is that Trump did prep with Tulsi Gabbard. I didn't see anything Gabbard-like in Donald Trump's performance at the debate. And I'll be honest, I was yelling at the TV screen during the debate, like, say this, say this, say this. He has so much ammunition, and I feel like she just rolled over him. I've watched some analysis and done some of my own, and it is beyond dispute, can't be argued. She did not answer a single question that night. The question would be posed. She would venture off into her usual, opportunity economy and a new way forward. All of this, by the way, completely disregarding the fact that she's been in office for almost 4 years. So this whole platform of a new way forward makes it sound like she has not been in office and she's running against Joe Biden, or she got the nomination over Joe Biden. So it's a very odd platform of hers to be talking about a new way forward and all these things that we're going to do. And of course, no particular plan or concise plan offered for any of these things. So complete smoke and mirrored pony show. But to be fair, if you can actually say there's a winner loser in a debate, which I've always thought is a little bit maybe over the top or precocious, but if you're going to say that, to me, it was a clear win for Kamala Harris that night. One of the other things that struck me, aside from her, rabid Wolverine-type performance on stage, was her facial expressions as she watched the former president while he was speaking, and as they had with the Trump-Biden debate, they had the screen up all the time so you could see both participants regardless of who was talking. And she had, I think I counted 22 different well-rehearsed facial expressions for disbelief, astonishment, I'm shocked, he's a crazy person, I'm incredulous. All of these really disparaging faces that, number one, I thought were very disrespectful to a former president. Trump did not do that to President Biden during the debate, and he certainly could have mocked Joe Biden and been making faces and all that stuff. And to be fair, it wouldn't have been beyond Trump to have done that, but he didn't do it. So I thought that what she did there with the facial expressions and the smirk and smug kind of look that she gave him, I thought was very disrespectful. But from a pure theater acting standpoint, I'd be surprised if she doesn't get an hour inside the actor's studio with James Lipton for that performance, except that James Lipton might be dead. On the other hand, that would make him the perfect interviewer for her. But Oscar grade performance by Kamala Harris that night. She did everything she needed to do, didn't answer a single question, came across as, inspirational, looking to the future, a new way forward, let's leave the past behind. And Trump just missed so many opportunities. So do I think this changes the dynamic of the race? I don't know. I'm not an expert at this. Do I think Trump loses support? No. Trump's existing support is solid. Do I think she picks up some support from this? Likely. But more importantly, I think President Trump missed a really huge opportunity, and what's likely going to be the only opportunity to present himself to people who otherwise have not seen him. They're not watching the rallies. They're probably Trump haters. So anytime they see him on the news, they're going to switch the channel. But I think 70 million some odd people watch the debate, which is a pretty impressive audience. So he missed a huge opportunity there, and he has so much ammunition. When she got off into the abortion thing, I'm thinking, aside from the fact of what a tired and kind of worn out subject it is, I mean, the Supreme Court ruled on it. It's been turned over to the states. This isn't, it's an issue that we're never going to agree on as a country because there's a religious aspect which is impenetrable for people who are avidly religious. I mean, life begins at conception, and that's where the argument begins and ends for them. I'm more of a, can you make a decision like inside of 3 months so that, it's not so gruesome or graphic? I'm actually pro-choice, but within limits. I don't think that we should be terminating pregnancies in the 6th, 7th, 8th month, and certainly not just before birth or after birth. But nonetheless, it's an issue that there's never going to be agreement on in this country. But I think what Trump should have said when she brought that up was, if you're so concerned about women's rights, I would think you'd have some concern about transgender men competing on women's swim teams and women's sports. That's certainly not, the fact that that's happening is not supportive of women. I would think you'd be concerned about minor women, and that would be the children of the 330,000 missing children in the United States of America, as hard as that is to believe. And, certainly a large majority of those would be young girls that are being sex trafficked and drug trafficked and are working illegally in, awful situations. And surely a lot of them are just dead. So, 330,000 children missing in the United States of America. Trump never broached the subject. 103,000 fentanyl deaths last year. Trump never broached the subject. Over 200,000 opioid overdoses in this country last year. Trump never broached the subject. Like I said, I'm fond of the former president. If you've watched the show, I've worked on his campaign. I've met him. I've met his family. I interviewed him at one time for a radio show I was doing. But to be fair and honest, I'm not going to put lipstick on a pig here. I think he had a dismal performance that night. As everyone knows, he's running around the country now stating otherwise, which is to be expected. And it's certainly possible, as has often been the case with many, many things, that I've been involved with Trump's presidential efforts since April of 2015. So a long time, over 9 years. And I can tell you during that 9 years, there's been dozens and dozens at least of occasions where I thought, oh my God, why did you say that? You're done. This is it. It's over. And then somehow he makes it work for him. So very often his instincts are correct, certainly much better than mine. And like I said, I'm not an expert at this. But I don't think there's any way to deny that he missed a huge opportunity that night to present himself to people who wouldn't otherwise see him and won't see him again. A big opportunity there to present a different side of himself. We saw a little glimmer of that at the Republican National Convention. Of course, that was right on the heels of the assassination attempt. I think he was affected by that, at least for a while. He claims now that he was a changed person for 30 minutes, which probably not far off. But nonetheless, I think he missed an opportunity to show a different side of himself, a bit more thoughtful side. And after all, this is about winning. So for a guy that likes to win almost more than anything, and this is something that has perplexed me always about Trump, if you like to win, don't say stupid things like in the middle of a debate, start talking about they're eating their pets in Springfield, Ohio. We don't know that. It's unsubstantiated, although J.D. Vance claims, probably correctly, that he is a senator in Ohio after all, and that he's hearing from people on the ground that, yes, this is happening. But to that point, I saw J.D. Vance in an interview on either MSNBC or CNN where the anchor presented him with that, said, basically Donald Trump said during the debate that people are eating their pets. He went on to say that he believes that that's happening on at least some scale based on what he's heard. But he went on to say that they're really missing the point. The point is when you take a struggling city like Springfield, Ohio, and you increase the population of that city by 20% almost overnight, with an entirely different culture, a culture that primarily does not speak English, largely unskilled, and largely supported by the taxpayers there, that has a detrimental effect on that city. And we're seeing that all over the world, all over the country, I should say. Well, all over the world, because it's happening in Europe too. It's not a melting pot anymore. It's just kind of a pot. I've talked about it on the show before. There's a big difference between immigration in the 20s, 30s, and 40s. I've mentioned before how my late mother's parents came here from Sicily, but they flew the American flag. They spoke English. My grandfather would not have taken a handout from the government you couldn't have forced him to do it. And if you had suggested it, he probably would have kicked your ass into next week. So that was the melting pot where people came here, and sure, we had our Italian culture, our Italian cuisine, but it became part of America, and my grandparents always called themselves Americans, like most of us do. I don't call myself German, Italian, American. I'm an American. And my grandparents, once they came here, called themselves Americans, not even Italian Americans, Americans. They came here legally through Ellis Island, became citizens, and after that, they were American citizens. I also have to talk about, this is pretty interesting. So John Kirby, just a couple days ago, was having some emails back and forth with Washington staff, or his staff in Washington, and unbeknownst to him, Fox Digital was included in the email chain. So I'm assuming that goes back to, probably him arranging an interview on Fox or something like that. But somehow Fox Digital was in on this email chain. And in the email chain, Kirby says to he thinks he's communicating to one of his staff in Washington and complaining about how they keep talking about the Afghanistan withdrawal and the 13 service members who died. And he referred to those 13 service members as just a handful and mostly of the same stripe. So in other words, not even a number, 13 people died. He's going to call it a handful, and mostly of the same stripe, all conservative Trump supporters. As we know, the Gold Star families of those 13 service people have all expressed their gratitude towards Trump, and Trump has met with them all, and they're all clearly Trump supporters. So here's John Kirby, one of the higher-ups and ostensibly, likely one of the people who's been running the country for the last 4 years. It hasn't been Joe Biden. It's not now, and it hasn't been. But I think John Kirby is one of the upper echelon there. Certainly had a hand in policy, basically writing off these 13 members as, yeah, hey, it's just a handful, Absolutely despicable and kind of despicable beyond belief. That brings me back to another issue in the debate where Kamala Harris said that there are currently no active service members in a war zone anywhere, and that is flagrantly and demonstrably false. We just had a whole bunch of military people get injured in the Middle East. And then not to mention the 13 who died during the Afghanistan withdrawal. So it's kind of stunning that the sitting vice president of the country doesn't even know that we do have active military in war zones right now. I mean, just think about that. This is the woman who's in this very broadcast is explaining to you why she should be president and a new way forward. Well, excuse me, part of a new way forward would be having a leader who knows how many active military people are in war zones and in harm's way. She's an empty vessel. We all know that. She was very well rehearsed that night. She did exactly what she needed to do. She basically ran out the clock with her usual blather. And then, of course, it dispersed with her this myriad assortment of facial expressions while Trump was speaking, which, if you haven't paid attention to it, you should go back and take a second look because it's so rehearsed and so kind of over the top. But then again, to be fair, I feel like Trump really played into that to a large degree. So going back to the Springfield, Ohio thing, of course, there's memes, and everyone's having a big field day now with this eating their pets thing, and myself included. I made the unusual food truck joke this morning that you're going to see in Springfield, Ohio. But the sad reality is that these things are all shaping the country. They're all part of the demise of the country. One of Trump's remarks after the debate was when he got questioned on his presentation, and he said, well, I'm angry. I'm angry about what's happening to the country, and I'm just having a hard time getting past that anger. Well, we're all angry, but you can't get to where you need to be to save the country without disciplining yourself to a larger degree. This is my concern. Even Bernie Sanders said a week or two ago of Kamala Harris, and someone had asked Bernie about what do you think about her 180-degree turn on her values, her things. She's always been anti-fracking. She's always, all these positions that she's had, and they're on videotape. They're documented, and now they're just like all collectively out the window. And Bernie Sanders kind of said the quiet part out loud. He said, well, she's being pragmatic and doing what she needs to do to win the White House. And that's exactly what they're doing. It's what the Democrats always do. Obama did it. Clinton did it. They move to the center, they win, and then they go back to what their real policies are. I'm not sure any of that matters. I think the country is really kind of split down the middle, 50-50. The other side, I feel like, is really motivated by emotion and Trump derangement syndrome. Anyone but Trump, anybody but conservative. They don't like traditional American values. They don't like any of it. And so it's just purely driven by that. So for them, Kamala Harris's prowess with leadership, it doesn't mean anything to them. They don't care. We were just talking about before the show that Taylor Swift came out and endorsed. Well, okay, Taylor Swift's not affected by food prices. She's not affected if her electric bill doubles. She's not affected by the price of gasoline and car insurance. It's just really everything for most middle Americans, everything we touch, everything we need, everything we do, all the basic things that we need to live an orderly life are all costing us at least twice as much as they did when Trump was president. So I don't know. Very, very interesting times we're in. It's going to be interesting to see where it goes from here. But the honest fact of it is we're running out of time here. I mean, the election is basically around the corner at this point. Early voting starts next week in many states. I'm not sure that even in this course of this 4 years that we have gotten a handle on the election integrity portion of this. In other words, can we really count on an honest election? I don't think we've gained a lot of ground there with the mail-in ballots, and we still don't have a universal across the country voting system where all the voting machines are the same. Paper ballots, show your ID, prove your citizenship. I don't think we've gained a lot of ground there. And so I think that this election, as it was last time, is very vulnerable to fraud, is very vulnerable to illegitimate votes. And so we don't know how much that's going to play out. I can imagine, and I could build a case for either scenario, that Trump wins by a landslide, at least electorally, that the poll numbers we're seeing are way off, because they often are with Trump. A lot of people are not forthcoming about their support for Trump for obvious reasons. And I think it's really hard to get a solid gauge on where things are. What I do think is that in this last 5 or 6 weeks, one side or the other is going to start to gain some momentum. And just like the centrifugal force on a tilt-a-wheel at your local carnival, that centrifugal force, that gravitational pull is going to grow, and it's going to get harder and harder to pull yourself away from the seat on that. So someone's going to start gaining momentum here in the next several weeks, and I think this will be that trend will be hard to reverse for whichever side it is. So tons of interesting stuff happening all over the world. Russia and China and some other country now just announced this morning that they are doing war games or military exercises, and these are the largest military exercises in the history of the planet. Very concerning, should be very concerning to everybody as these superpowers zero in their joining forces, joining efforts. And the United States of America right now is very much like a turtle on its back. And, it could only be a matter of time before a hawk swoops down and rips the guts out of our shell. We're super vulnerable right now. I don't think there's any dispute about that. Militarily, culturally, we don't have a republic here of which I think a lot of people would stand up and stand up for their country if we were called upon to do so. So I think we're in a very, very vulnerable place, and it took a long time to get here. It's going to take a long time to get out of it, but the one thing we will need to get out of it is a universal will to do so, and I don't know if that's even possible anymore. That I don't want to be a pessimist, but I think that ship may well have sailed. So we'll have plenty more to talk about in the upcoming weeks here. Like I said, beautiful fall weekend here in New Hampshire. We got kind of one of those late summer, early fall weather up here as the leaves start to turn and we have these kind of sultry days. So beautiful weather up here, and trying to enjoy it despite the hovering dark cloud of a questionable presidential election looming before us. So enjoy the weather, enjoy your weekend. Make sure you get out there with your friends and, throw a dachshund or a cat on the grill, a couple of cold beers. God bless America. Keep the blue side up, and don't choke on any fur balls. Thanks for joining us.